Hey, everybody. Glad to be here with you tonight. Going to have yet another one of our great late night chats. So let's do it. Let's have our conversation.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So I'm going to talk about a few things tonight. As I always do, the format that we use on these streams, for those of you who may not be familiar, is I give my opening remarks. Then after that, we do a roll call where I call you all out as I see you. We find out who is on the other side of the camera, who's watching. And then after that, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. And there we go. That's the way we do things on this channel. But as you are also probably very, very familiar with on this channel, we also tend to we do announcements first. Right before we do anything, we do announcements. And tonight, we are going to remind you, as we always do, that this is about much more than just a guy on YouTube. We are an organization, the Center for Political Innovation. That is the name of our group. And we exist. Our website is cpiusa.org. And our organization is involved in a lot of different activities. Rainer Shea, a member of our group who writes for Substack and leads the Humboldt Socialist Union out in California. He just wrote a great op-ed for our website about our recent endorsement and our sponsorship of the upcoming Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C. Now, I don't know if I will be at the Rage Against the War Machine rally or not, because a lot of things are up in the air, but I do know that we are listed. We donated quite a bit of money. They tweeted us out today. So if you're in the DC area and you are wanting to go to a very important anti-war demonstration, I would encourage you to find your way to the Rage Against the War Machine rally, officially sponsored by the Center for Political Innovation. And if you go to our website, you will find a great statement written about our endorsement of this important anti-war demonstration. A great statement written by Rainer Shea, who's a member of our group, who's a great writer out in Humboldt County, California. Great statement by Rainer about our endorsement. Rainer's come on this channel many times. Rainer is great and beloved. So that's the first big announcement, is that we as CPI are sponsors of the very important anti-war demonstration coming up in Washington, D.C. on, is it Sunday or Saturday? Which one is it? It is, I'm going to find out. Is it on Saturday or on Sunday? I don't want to get the date wrong, so we're going to find out. I don't want to get the date wrong, so I will look on Twitter. I know there's two rallies happening. The first one is a little bit more of a standard Republican conservative rally. It's called Restore the Republic. I think that's happening. And then there's also the Rage Against the War Machine rally. And we are proud supporters of the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I mean, we probably agree with a lot of what's being said. It's on the 28th, on Saturday. We would probably agree with a lot of what's being said at the Restore the Republic rally, but we decided to throw our endorsement behind the Rage Against the War Machine rally. Very, very important. We appreciated getting tweeted out by the Rage Against the War Machine Coalition. Angela McCurdle, friend. Nick Brana, People's Party, friend. We're very glad to be sponsors of this event. We think it's a very, very important event, and we're really glad to be sponsors of it. In addition to that, every morning on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel, we have morning messages. And these morning messages are great. I'm going to schedule the one for tomorrow as soon as this broadcast is over. We had a great one this morning from Dan Niswander. It was very, very good. And you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and tune in every single morning. Start your day with revolutionary hope and optimism. Listen on your phone, on your computer to the morning message from CPI. Start your day with revolutionary hope and optimism and get to know the different people in our group. Get to know the people, right? Dan's message was today. We've had messages from Tim. We've had messages from Rachel. We've had messages from all kinds of people from the organization, and you'll get to know all the people that are in the chat, but all the people that are also in the group. You'll get to know them. And that's what morning messages are there for. It's a way to keep engaged. Don't let the pessimism and hopelessness of this world consume you. Stay in touch with other people. That is the idea. Right? That is the idea. Now, if you want to submit a morning message, which we absolutely have the option for you to do, if you like what we're doing, submit a morning message. We've had a couple submissions lately from new people who've never submitted one before. Anway from India, he submitted a morning message. Beautiful, right? There was somebody out in another part of the country who's a viewer, and they submitted a morning message. It's a great thing to do. So if you would like to send a morning message of your own, make your own morning message, tell a story, read something to us from a book, or whatever you want to do, whatever you think will inspire people, submit a morning message. That's a great thing that you can do. And drum roll, please. Coming up, October 12th, there will be an all-day workshop in the Chicago area, a CPI workshop. The title is Working Families First, Build the Economy, Not the Empire. And I was just talking to Peter Coffin on the phone about it today. It is going to be a firecracker workshop, a whole new format that we've never done before. Music, speeches. You'll get to meet Peter Coffin. It'll be classes that are interactive, fun activities, and it's just one day, right? It's going to be great. So send me an email if you would like to participate in this workshop. We'll be out in the Chicago area. It'll be a one-day event, catered food, good food, music, all the whole 9 yards. You'll get to meet other people. You get to learn what our efforts are all about, what innovationism and anti-imperialism is about, and what it means for you. So that is coming up. So mark your calendar and send me an email. I'm almost done with the registration form, and Peter is almost done with the beautiful, beautiful poster, and we had a great Zoom call about it on Sunday. So it's coming together. But, the sooner that you get this stuff out there, the better. It's about a month away, and so I wanted to let you all know about it. It's going to be a great all-day workshop, October 12th, which is a Saturday in the Chicago area. Be there. It'll be a lot of fun. And on that note, folks, we do now proceed with the broadcast. So I'll be giving my opening remarks, which are then followed by a roll call. And after that, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, send a super chat on YouTube or send a Rumble rant on Rumble. So here we go. Now, first things first. First thing I want to say before we get to anything, I got to say this, which is that there is buzz right now. I saw that Scott Ritter has spoken up, and there is now buzz indicating that some people believe, I am not endorsing this yet, I'm just telling you what there's buzz about. There is buzz indicating that some people believe that a strong case can be made that Ukraine, the Ukrainian government, tried to kill Donald Trump and may have also tried to kill RFK. Now, I can't confirm this. And I'm not ready to speak on this with any depth because I cannot confirm it. And I urge people to be very, very, very careful with this kind of thing. This is a very serious allegation if it is true. If a foreign government came to the United States and attempted to kill a major presidential candidate and former president, that is huge. That's huge. And we know that the latest attempt on Donald Trump's life was done by a Ukrainian, a Ukraine fanatic, a man who went to Ukraine and was working apparently with the U.S. Embassy to recruit people to fight in Ukraine from Afghanistan. He was involved in a recruitment program for the Ukrainian government. He was a guy with a long criminal record and clearly some mental illness, but he did work with the Ukrainian government. But we don't know, right? As far as we know, the guy acted alone in a fit of mental instability. We do not know what happened here, but I'm seeing what Scott Ritter has said, and I am seeing what other people are saying, and I am collecting information, and I'm digging into this because I don't want to just jump up and say that this happened unless I can prove it and I can back it up with something, because this is a really, really, because if this is the truth, if this was indeed the truth, that at least one of these attempts on Trump's life was done in conspiracy with the Ukrainian government, if the Ukrainian government has also tried to take out RFK, that needs to be, we have to let everyone know. I mean, at that point, mainstream media will try to hush that up. We have to scream that from the heavens. That is huge, especially in light of all this bullshit about foreign meddling in the elections. Oh my God, Russia bought a meme. Russia, if there's talk of foreign meddling in the elections, it doesn't get more foreign meddling than that. We're giving billions and billions of our tax dollars to Ukraine. And for Ukraine to then turn around because they're afraid that Donald Trump might turn off the spigot and attempt to kill Donald Trump or attempt to kill RFK. Look, I am just collecting information right now. I don't want to come out swinging saying that until I have got some very solid proof. But I'm seeing some very convincing things about this, the Ukrainian Ryan Roth and his latest attempt, about the Ukrainian government kill list, which I'm on, by the way. I'm actually on the Ukrainian government's list of information terrorists. But, I'm not the only one. Scott Ritter is on that list, and so is Donald Trump, and so is RFK. And many people have said that is a kill list because there's a number of people on that list who have been assassinated. So I don't know what to say, right? I'm just seeing what Scott Ritter has said, and I'm seeing what's elsewhere, and I'm waiting for information. I would encourage others to start investigating as well. Anything that we can find, right, that would back up or give credibility to this theory, we need to dig into it. Because if this is true, that Ukraine is somehow involved with the recent presidential assassination attempts against Donald Trump and against RFK, if that is true, we need to raise the alarm about this. But we need to find out if it's true or not, right? The only thing that I can say with substantiation is that we know that the last attempt on President Trump's life that took place at the golf course, that attempt was done by Ryan Roth, and Ryan Roth is a Ukrainian, a Ukraine fanatic, a Ukraine maniac, and popularized this term, Ukrainiac, because that is what he is. A Ukraine maniac, a violent, mentally ill person who, held police at gunpoint and had a shootout with law enforcement and went to prison for illegal firearms. A guy from South Carolina with serious mental illness who, after doing his prison time or whatever, found his way to Ukraine and was a Ukrainian government recruiter and he wanted to fight in the Ukrainian military, and they thought he was too crazy, and they said, why don't you become a recruiter? And so he was on social media, apparently using Facebook and other apps, to try and recruit Afghans to join the Ukrainian military to fight against Russia. And he was involved in this program. We know that. That is all true. He wrote a book about Ukraine that was for sale for a very cheap amount of money on Amazon, in which he compared Ukraine to Taiwan. He's also a Taiwan maniac, not surprising. You hate Russia, you hate China. And then he, came back to the United States, and we know that he apparently took a shot at the president. He was waiting, in a certain area, and he seemed to know that Donald Trump was going to be on the golf course on that particular day. And he seemed to have information about where on the golf course Donald Trump was going to be, that he was going to be playing on this particular day. He waited for many hours in this spot with his gun. And then he was caught by the Secret Service. So that's all we know. That's really all we know at this point. But what Scott Ritter is saying, I respect Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter tends to know what he's talking about. And this is a former UN weapons inspector. This is somebody who has, helped de-escalate the Cold War, etc. So there's a lot of, credibility. If someone like Scott Ritter, who's formerly a very high-ranking military guy, is coming forward and saying it looks like Ukraine tried to kill Donald Trump, I don't take that lightly, but I'm not ready to just repeat it on that basis. I want to hear the whole story first, and I am going to do research, and I think you should all do research. And if this is true, we need to raise that from the heavens. We need to make that abundantly clear. And as far as this election is concerned, and I want to spend this live talking about our community and talking about various things, but as far as this election is concerned, let me just say this. This election is becoming a referendum on Ukraine. That's what it's turning into. That is the clear difference between the two candidates. Kamala Harris wants to spend billions of American tax dollars on Ukraine and attacks Donald Trump for not wanting to do that. Donald Trump says he will end this war immediately. He will make a deal. He will call up Zelensky and he will call up Putin and he will end this war immediately. That's what he said. And he furthermore has said that he doesn't want Ukraine to win. He just wants the killing to stop, which is considered an unforgivable crime in mainstream media. And now a Ukraine fanatic tried to take the president's life, Ryan Roth. So while Donald Trump has said all kinds of things about all kinds of issues, cats and puppies and grab her by the whatever, and it's starting to look like this election is turning into a referendum on Ukraine and by de facto a referendum on World War III. Abraham Lincoln, when he ran for president in 1860, he said he did not want to abolish slavery. He said that black people were inferior to whites. He said he opposed interracial marriage. He said a lot of awful things. But because he was not in favor of the federal government accommodating slavery anymore, he said no more slave states, no more fugitive slave law. We're not going to go, other states have no obligation to go, arrest slaves who run away and take them back to the South. No more fugitive slave law. No more slave states. The new states that joined don't have slavery, because he said that. The 1860 presidential election turned into a referendum on slavery. And even though Abraham Lincoln said that he would have fought the Civil War without freeing a single slave, it didn't matter. In order to win the Civil War, he had to end slavery. He had to pass the Emancipation Proclamation and eventually constitutional amendments prohibiting slavery. And slavery had to be outlawed because that was such a big divide. And it is looking like this upcoming election is turning into a referendum on World War III and a referendum on Ukraine. And whether Donald Trump wants that or not, and whether Kamala Harris wants that or not, that seems to be the issue, right? Even though Abraham Lincoln said he wasn't against slavery, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln won the election, and the people who voted for him were the people that were against slavery, and the people who voted against him were the people who were for slavery. And after Abraham Lincoln won, the Southerners broke away and seceded from the country. They said, we can't even be part of the country anymore. So even though, both candidates in the election said, this is not a race about slavery, it was. And sometimes you have an election where the two candidates are not really what is on the ballot. Rather, it is a burning issue that is dividing the country. And I can think of really only 3 elections in American history where that has been the case, where the two major candidates didn't really represent themselves. They represented a burning issue. The first one is when Abraham Lincoln ran for president the first time. The second one is 1864. And that was when Abraham Lincoln ran for re-election, because if the Democrats had defeated Abraham Lincoln in 1864, they would have signed a peace treaty with the South, and the South would have kept slavery and broken away from the United States. That's what the Democratic Party, that was their platform, peace treaty with the South. And so Abraham Lincoln said, don't change horses midstream. And that election was also about slavery. Are we going to allow slavery to continue, or are we going to fight this war to the finish and defeat the slave owners? The other election that I would argue that became about much more than that was the 1936 presidential election. In 1936, Roosevelt ran for president for re-election after his first term. And at the time, he was supporting industrial unions. He was supporting the right of workers to form labor unions, and he was passing lots of reforms to help unemployed people. He hired millions of unemployed people, and he made clear that he wanted to pass Social Security and unemployment insurance. And he was running on that platform. And in 1936, the Republicans, they ran on a platform of stopping what Roosevelt was doing. And there were many in the Republican camp in 1936, and many Democrats who didn't vote for Roosevelt in 1936, who felt that the labor movement, that the labor unions that were emerging represented the threat of communist revolution, and that it was necessary to set up a fascist military dictatorship in order to crush them. And the issue on the ballot in 1936 was really democracy or fascism. Roosevelt, as a Bonapartist who was embracing the labor movement, wanted to preserve democracy and wanted to pass labor reforms to support workers on the job and to help the unemployed. Whereas the people who opposed him, the American Liberty League, the Union Party, and the Republican Party, all wanted a fascist dictatorship to stabilize the economy with military spending and crush the labor unions. That's what they wanted. Roosevelt was looking for inspiration from the Soviet Union and their 5-year plans to some degree to figure out his mass construction of highways and bridges. And the American Liberty League and the Republicans during that election were looking for inspiration from Mussolini and from Hitler and their heavy-handed military regimes that crushed the labor unions. And so that was really what was on the ballot. Are you leaning closer to Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, or are you leaning closer to the Soviet Union? Should labor unions be allowed to continue? And Roosevelt, again, wasn't the best president in a lot of different ways. Japanese internment, we can go down the line. And I probably wouldn't have voted for Roosevelt in 1932, and I probably wouldn't have voted for him in 1940. But in 1936, that election was very clearly about democracy or fascism, and do workers have the right to form unions? And that's what that election was about. Roosevelt was not running as Roosevelt. He was running as the democracy and right to form unions guy. And Wendell Willkie and the Republicans were not running as Republicans. They were running as the crush the labor movement and embrace fascism folks. And that election very, very clearly came down to that issue. And I think we are heading for such an election this fall. We are heading for an election coming up November 5th, that the issue on the ballot is, should we march toward World War III or not? That is the issue. And Donald Trump has used talk of World War III and talked about the danger of nuclear war. And he has said he doesn't want Ukraine to win. And a Ukrainiac tried to kill Donald Trump. And that is clearly the difference between the two candidates. One candidate is embracing World War III. The other candidate is opposing it. And you can, I mean, again, we'll see how things develop. It may be that the conversation changes in the next couple months, and it's not about that. But it's starting to look like that is going to be the issue when the vote happens. So I want everyone to keep that in mind, and we'll be following this story about the potential that it was actually, Ukrainian involvement in this attempted assassination on Trump. We don't know the facts. We don't know yet. We're going to dig into it. I respect Scott Ritter. And so we're just going to look into these facts, and we're going to find out if this is true. And if it is true, we're going to raise it from the heavens. If it's not true, or if we can't find solid evidence of that beyond mere speculation, we have to be careful. But that is my feeling. And with that said, I'm going to leave talk of this election aside at the moment. And I'm going to talk about what is the title that I gave this stream, which is what keeps me going. Why not surrender? Folks, I'll be honest with you. As much as I feel that no matter what happens, it's going to be okay, there's a bit of anxiety in my life right now. All right? This is not the best moment. My job situation remains up in the air. People that are close to me have been arrested and convicted, and there's a lot just that I don't know at this moment. I just don't know. And I don't know, right? And I continue to hear from people who think they know, and they don't. They don't know. I don't know what is going to happen with my job, right? I hope that I can continue to do the job that I've been doing for the past 8 years that I love. And, at this point, I very well could. I just don't know. I hope that I don't get indicted and accused of being a foreign agent of a foreign government, which I certainly am not. I am a true patriot if there ever was one, but I don't know. It could happen, right? It could happen. I don't know what is going to happen. I really don't. But I do know that I can't sit around worrying about whatever might happen. I have to focus on the job that I need to do. And because I need to focus on the job that I need to do, I want to talk to you all about what keeps me going and why I don't surrender. But before I do that, I have to point out that it really doesn't matter what keeps me going and why I don't surrender. That's really not the biggest and most important thing in this conversation. What's far, far more important is why you keep going and why you don't surrender. Because if I just kept going by myself, it wouldn't matter. If I just didn't surrender by myself, it wouldn't matter. What matters is there are thousands of people who watch these streams. And I come on here night after night, and I talk to you about global politics, about economics, about world history, about philosophy, about psychoanalysis, about psychology, about visions for building a strong anti-imperialist movement in the United States. And you all just keep coming back. Every night, you guys are here. I know that when I stream, there's going to be at least 100, or right now there's 121 people watching this live. And I know that afterwards, there will be thousands of people that will watch this. I know that you all keep coming back. You all want me to do this. And that is confirmation that I'm right in what I am doing. And the fact that many of you have joined the Center for Political Innovation, the fact that many of you have donated to our projects that we are working on currently, that further confirms to me that whatever I'm doing here seems to matter on some level. And so that is the more important question. Why are you here? What keeps you going? Why don't you surrender? That's the most important question. And I feel like what I do on these broadcasts has something to do with keeping you here. Because there's a lot of YouTube channels on this stream. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of YouTube channels out there. You could be watching cat videos or sports or country music from the 1970s, or you could be watching anything, but I'm here. And you keep coming back. You want to watch this. You want to be here. You want to be here. And that means that I am giving you something. I am giving you something. And I think that what you ought to do is figure out what that is. You don't have to tell me. I mean, it might be useful to me because then I could consider that. But honestly, you don't have to tell me. You should know for yourself. What brings you back here? What is it that you like to hear on these streams? What is it that has made you decide that this is going to be part of your reality? You're going to wake up in the morning with the CPI morning messages. You are going to watch Caleb Maupin's live streams. You are going to read our books. You are going to engage with our ideas. You're going to be in the chat, making super chats and making comments and engaging with other people. What is it that brings you here? Because I must tell you, unfortunately, many people never dig in to their own mind. Many people just go through life doing whatever feels good in the moment. You know, hey, I feel like doing this. Okay. I feel like turning on the TV. Okay. I feel like going outside. Okay. I feel like putting my feet up. Okay. And they never ask why. They never dig into their motivations. And if you do that, right, what really happens is that it's almost like you're allowing a bunch of invisible ghosts to lead you around by a leash. It's not a good way to live, right? And when we talk about neurosis in the Freudian sense, that's what neurosis is. There's a ghost, an invisible ghost that has a leash around your neck, and it's leading you one way, and it's leading you another way, and you don't know why it's leading you there. You just know, oh, I feel like doing this. Oh, I feel like doing that. Oh, I had an argument with this person. Oh, I gave this person, I fell in love with this person. Oh, I did this. And you don't know why. And you just know, I have this feeling. I get really angry for some reason when this happens. Don't know why. I am really desperate to please this person. This person really annoys me. This, I really feel like doing this. When I'm doing this, I like it. I really like this kind of movie. I really don't like this kind of movie. And that's all you know. And if all you know is, I feel this way, and you never ask why, your ability to take control and your ability to regulate and know yourself and your ability to learn and not make the same mistakes over and over and over again will be very limited. there's a quote that many people use, and they misuse it. And they say, well, didn't Albert Einstein say that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and not learning from it? I don't know if Albert Einstein said it, but if Albert Einstein said it, what he was referring to was the Freudian or psychoanalytic definition of neurosis. And neurosis is when you are stuck in a pattern, when there are patterns in your life that you are unaware of and that you are repeating and not learning from them. Because human beings are learning creatures. We learn from our mistakes. But neurosis is when you are making mistakes in your life, specifically in your interactions with other people, and you are not learning from them. And the way to overcome your neurosis, again, speaking in the Freudian sense, is to dig into your subconscious mind, to dig into your past, to dig into your hidden desires, hidden fears, hidden anger, and find out why certain things make you happy, why certain things make you angry, why you're afraid of certain things, why you're you have certain desires. What is it that drives you? What is it that drives you? And that is a journey that you need to go on in order to fulfill your potential. If you want to achieve the maximum potential, you want to have the most meaningful relationships, you want to have the most success at your job or in business or in the community you live in, if you want to get shit done in this world, if you want to improve the happiness you have in your life, you need to understand why you do things. And in order to do that, you need to dig into your subconscious. And that's what you need to do. And I'm just telling you this. I'm telling you this as a friend, as a guy who you check in with every night. I'm telling you this because I want to know, you want to know, and this is important. So that's the first thing about when I talk about what keeps me going. I feel like to some degree or other, I know what keeps me going. And the first thing I know is that I have always been intellectually curious. I want to know. I want to know. I was brought up, my mother was a librarian, and from the time I could learn to read, I knew how to read. I was taught how to look it up. We had an encyclopedia in my house. That's this archaic thing they had before Google existed. This collection of books where it had articles by alphabetical order. And it had one book for every letter. And we had an encyclopedia, a world book encyclopedia at our house. And often when we were at dinner talking, my mother or my father, and eventually me, we would get up and go to the encyclopedia and take it out. And I was always taught from a young age to be intellectually curious. If someone used a word that I did not know, I looked it up in the dictionary, right? If somebody referred to a historical event that I had not heard of, I went and I got the World Book and I looked it up. I wanted to know. And that is a really important thing, to want to know. But it goes against the way we are socialized in this society. All right, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie They Live, but there's a very famous scene in the movie They Live where the two main characters, one who's played by Roddy Piper, they're fighting because Roddy Piper wants his friend who's a construction worker to put some glasses on. He has some sunglasses that allow him to see the world for what it really is. And he has this big, long fight with his friend, trying to get his friend to put the glasses on. Put the glasses on. And his friend doesn't want to put the glasses on because his friend is afraid of what he might see. And that is the reality that many of us live in. Many of us don't want to know. We don't want to see. And in fact, if you work in the service sector, the more you know, the harder it can be to do your job. They want you to just be a robot. And if you know too much and you ask too many questions, you might not be a good robot. But yet, if you work in the service sector, that means you work with people. And if you are around people, you're going to be curious about those people. And in fact, if you're engaged in any kind of marketing or sales, you're going to need to be interested in the people around you. So it's a contradiction. It is an absolute contradiction. Intellectual curiosity is a really, really important thing to cultivate. It's a really, really important thing to cultivate. Dan Niswander was an extra in They Live. Okay, I'm just stopping the stream to just talk about how cool that is. That is really, really, really cool, Dan. Dan, you are the man. Dan Niswander, CPI member, friend of mine, rock and roll musician. Dan Niswander was an extra in the movie They Live. Stop the press, stop the street. I can't. That is awesome. I have shown that movie at CPI retreats before. We've talked about it. Dan, you made my night. You made my night. That is so cool. That is so cool. They Live is a sci-fi movie from the 1980s. And it's admitted, John Carpenter, the zombie guy, he made it. He admitted it was influenced by communism. Dan, my hat off to you. My hat off to you, Dan. That's pretty gosh darn cool. That is, you made my night. You made my night, Dan. Dan, that is the coolest thing I've heard in a really long time. I meet the best people in CPI. I really do. And wow, he walked behind Rowdy Rod Piper found a blurry image of myself. That is so cool, Dan. That is really, really cool. Dan, you made my night. I don't even know how to respond to that. That is wild. That is wild. Wow, I'm going to figure out what to do with that information. But anyway, They Live, the John Carpenter movie, features a member of CPI named Dan Niswander. That is very, very cool. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for sharing that. That is, you made my night. You made my night. But anyway, back to what I was talking about. Every so often I see something in the chat that makes me just have to stop the stream. And that makes me stop the stream. That was really, really cool. So there we go. I've been talking with Peter Coffin. I've been talking with other people about the Center for Political Innovation and what we are trying to do. And I've been thinking about how we have pivoted, right? Even though Marxism, And anti-imperialism is largely the foundation upon which many of us emerged politically, even though that is what this started out as, right? And even though I came at things with Marxism, I was in the Workers' World Party for 8 years. Even though that is the foundation, we are at the point that we are realizing that we are pioneering something completely new. We're pioneering something completely new. I guess I'll just tell you this. Your creativity is the most important thing that you have. Your ability to create something beautiful, to take things that exist in the world, whether it's paint or a building, or your ability to create, whether it's in the form of art, whether it's in the form of community service, whether it's in the form of whatever. Your ability to be creative is the most important thing that you have. Your ability to be creative is the most important thing that you have. And this is in Marxism. This is something that Frederick Engels knew about. I can pull up the quote. I think I have a screenshot of the quote. I should, if I don't. But I'll pull it up. I'll show you the quote. Frederick Engels, who was a Marxist, he knew it. He said it. Right? This is something that Frederick Engels was aware of, but it was just kind of a footnote. Frederick Engels commented on this in an essay that he wrote called "The Role Played by Labor in the Transition from Ape to Man." And he just kind of briefly touched on it. So, he's talking about, what defines human beings, how, he's talking about in terms of Darwinian evolution. Where is the dividing line, he argues, between an animal and a man? That's what he's arguing in this essay. And he's talking about thumbs, and he's talking about all of this. But then he gets to the point. And here it is. I will put it on the screen because this is very important. And this is Frederick Engels, a Marxist, after he spends this whole essay talking about, the transition from ape to man and the development of the opposable thumb and all this stuff, this modern biology. In just a couple sentences, he reveals what is really one of the most important truths that I have come to realize. And honestly, and I know Frederick Engels certainly didn't mean this, right? I mean, he was an atheist if there ever was one. But I look at this and I see this as evidence of the existence of God, right? And this is a reality that I have come to hang my hat on. And this is an aspect of something that Marxism pointed to. It was something that Karl Marx and Frederick Engels knew, and they noted it, and they made a check mark, and they kind of moved on. It was that they noted it, but Frederick Engels, in his essay, he's talking about the role played by labor from the transition from ape to man, and this is what he wrote. He wrote, "But all the planned action of animals has never succeeded in impressing the stamp of their will upon the earth. That was left for man. In short, the animal merely uses its environment and brings about changes in it simply by its presence. But man makes changes, by his changes, makes it serve his ends, masters it. And this is the final essential distinction between man and other animals. And I hope that I can communicate to you how important these sentences are. I almost want to start getting emotional right now, but if I do, maybe you don't get it, and so you'll think it's odd. And I don't want to get emotional, but I really want you to understand this. The fundamental difference between you and an ant and a monkey and a sheep and a dog, the fundamental difference between you and an animal, what makes you human, is your creativity. You got it. That is what makes you a human. You have the desire to master your environment, to impress the stamp of your will on this earth. No other creature has this ability, has this desire, has anything like this. And that's why no other species is out there inventing iPhones. There's no other species out there that's launching into outer space and creating spacecraft. There's no other species out there that can do what human beings can do. And none of them even have the desire to. Yeah, ants build ant farms, but their ant farms have been the same for thousands of years, and they just are. They don't think about it. It's just they're just kind of going through the motions when they make those ant farms. And those beavers, yeah, they build beaver dams, but the beaver dams have been the same way for thousands of years, and they don't think about it. They just kind of go through their life. But we human beings take the world around us and change it. We master the environment, and we force the environment to serve us. And this is something that defines us. This is who we are. Right? This is something that no other species can do. And at the time that Marx and Engels existed, they were focused on industrial production. And this is what's very, very important, right? And this is what I want you to understand. So, at the time that Marx and Engels existed, capitalism, the system of production organized for profit, was very, very new. It was a new, exciting economic system. And Marx was writing all about it and examining it. And he wrote, for example, about alienation, the alienation of labor. And he talked about how a basket weaver who weaves a basket puts a little bit of his soul into every basket, right? He sits there and there's something spiritual that the basket weaver has in connection to his baskets because he is being creative, and that there's a little bit of him in every basket that he weaves. And Marx writes about how when industry begins, that's not the case anymore. When there's hundreds of different people involved in making a product, and they're just on an assembly line, there's nothing, they have no spiritual connection to it, right? While a basket weaver in the old times has a deep connection to his baskets, and he does them a certain way, and you can see that they came from him and all of that. You know, somebody who works on an automotive assembly line, they clock in, they push a button, they do what they have to do all day as the cars go down the line. And when that car comes out, they have no relationship to it whatsoever. This is called alienation. right? And while that basket weaver feels some kind of enthusiasm, I'm going to go weave these baskets, I'm going to go make something, right? A factory worker, he comes in, he hates being there, and he wants to get home as soon as he can. That time is robbed from him. And when he is at work, he is not at home. And when he is at home, he is not at work. And that everything about his workplace is alien from him. He's renting himself out to somebody else in exchange for a wage. And he doesn't get the profits from it. He's just renting himself out. And that there is a kind of spiritual death that takes place in this process. This is what Karl Marx was writing about when his concept of alienated labor. And what he's writing about, even though Marx was a materialist, is a very, very spiritual question. Right? Because how do you measure how that worker feels? How do you measure that? You don't measure it, but you can tell what a basket weaver feels for his baskets. Somebody working on the assembly line does not feel for the products they churn out. And their relationship to their job and the lack of fulfillment and all of that is there. That's what Marx was writing about. And Marx developed a whole theory. And he started out talking about the unfairness between the worker and the employer, or the employee and the employer, and the worker and the capitalist. That's how he started out. But as Marx's life went on, he wrote this huge book called Capital, right? And he wrote a number of notebooks, including the Grundrisse, and he wrote theories of surplus value and all of that. And Marx picked up on something. He noticed a trend. Just getting it back in here. He noticed a trend that was happening during his life, which is that machinery was constantly getting more and more efficient. They were constantly figuring out how to make products with less and less workers involved in the process. They were figuring out how to more efficiently churn out goods and hire fewer and fewer people in the process. And he figured this out. Right? And this is a common thing. The capitalist wants to make as many profits as he possibly can. So he wants to make as many products as he possibly can. But at the same time, the capitalist wants to hire as few workers as he possibly can. He wants the workers that he hires to be as replaceable as possible. And so automation of industry is a constant reality. And so Karl Marx developed two very, very important concepts, one of which we have started calling the value crisis. Marx called it overproduction, but you can't call it overproduction now because people think that means there's too much stuff. Oh, I thought you were against degrowth. You're complaining about overproduction. They don't get it. So we call it value crisis. And the other is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. And he pointed out this whole thing that happens due to technological advancement. And I was taught this, right? And these are concepts Marx developed in his time. He noticed that as technology advances, there's less and less human labor power involved in production. And as there's less and less human labor power involved in production, the market becomes glutted with products that cannot be sold. And this is an ongoing problem. And I have been talking about this. I'm going to show what I've showed on here before, the socialist math video, where I explain it with mathematical formulas, right? This is not somebody's opinion. This is not somebody's opinion. And this is not the result of human beings being greedy, okay? Or human beings being unethical. This is the built-in reality of the capitalist mode of production. When you have capitalism, you have value crisis. You have a falling rate of profits. Technology leading to economic crisis. I will put it on. Explain what needs to be explained, what used to be considered Marxism 101, about why it is that our Western capitalist economy is crashing and burning. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to do some math. And I hate math. You know why I hate math? Because I grew up in America. I went to public school in the United States of America, so I am going to, at risk of embarrassing myself, because math was never my best subject, I am going to do some mathematics here on the board for you to explain the problem.
I very much enjoyed Caleb's speech.
So if you are creating a product, right, if you're a factory owner, you're making a product, you are going to need the material through which that product is made, the manufacturing materials. So that'll be A.
The simple equation you put forward to explain the crisis of overproduction and the falling rate of profit.
And you're probably going to need to transport the product to where it's sold. That's B.
It broke down where your money goes.
You're also going to have to pay your labor costs. Labor costs are represented by C.
Explanations of those concepts that people are able to understand.
Then when consumers purchase the product, they're going to pay a final price. And that final price is D. However, there's a problem with that.
I like the fact that he framed it that way to make it very clear.
Which is that the capitalist can't change how much A costs. He can't change how much B costs. So the profit of the capitalist can only be extracted from the value put into it by the worker. And this is the basis of Marxism, the understanding of surplus value.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere. I've never been able to explain it that simply.
So C, the labor value, is divided. You have C1, which is what the worker actually gets paid. And then you have C2, which is the profit that the capitalist makes. And it all adds up to D, which is the final cost of the product. Now, the way people in the United States who talk about Marxism generally talk about this is they say, well, this is unfair. They say the worker is not getting paid the full value of his labor. But they're missing one of the most important points, which is not just that it's unfair and then people argue, well, what about the employer? He put up the money, doesn't he deserve to be? That's all a distraction. Because the important thing to understand is this. C1 is always going to be less than D. The wages paid out to the worker are never enough to buy back the product that he produces. There is always more products created than there are wages paid out to the worker. And this is the built-in problem of capitalism, the problem of overproduction. And it is always there in the capitalist economy. It never goes away. And they have invented all kinds of crazy mechanisms to try and deal with the problem of overproduction. Part of the reason that the US government has purchased billions and billions of dollars worth of cheese only to bury it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri, is to deal with this problem. It is an ongoing present problem, and it's a problem acknowledged by most capitalist economists. John Maynard Keynes said the problem was underconsumption rather than overproduction, but he was pointing to the same problem. The military-industrial complex in the United States is an effort to deal with this problem, to keep spending going. There's all kinds of mechanisms that they've invented to try and resolve this problem, but it gets worse. What is the capitalist always trying to do? He wants to maximize the amount of profit he makes. And one of the main ways they do that is with what's called labor-saving technology. Get rid of workers and replace workers with machines. As they eliminate workers from the process of production, as there's fewer and fewer workers involved, as machines take the place of workers, the role of C in production decreases. There's a little bit of a problem with that. As C goes down, C2 also goes down, right? As C decreases, C2 also decreases. And as the role of the worker in production is reduced, the rate of profit that the capitalist makes goes down. And this is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. Only human labor creates value. And this is something that Adam Smith acknowledged. This is something some of the popes even acknowledge. Human labor creates all value. And so when you reduce the role of human labor in production, the amount of value created decreases, and the ability of the capitalist to extract surplus value also decreases. So this causes the capitalist to have to churn out even more products because he's making less and less of a profit on the overall product. He's making less and less of a percentage, so he has to churn them out. So this problem of the worker never being able to buy back what he produces and more products being created than are necessary, this problem becomes exacerbated. And this points to what is understood to be the deeply irrational nature of the capitalist system. All right. Now, Marx discovered that, and he discovered that there's this contradiction, that the more technology advances, the more human creative power enables us to produce products more efficiently, the sooner we have an economic crisis. In an irrational system where production is carried out in order to make profits for those who own the means of production, and the way profit is created is by extracting it from human labor power. When the amount of human labor involved in production goes down, the result is the amount of profit that can be extracted also goes down. And as a result, you have an economic crisis. And this problem, this frequent problem of the market having loads of products for sale and no one being able to buy them, people's wages going down, people being poorer than ever while there's more stuff than ever, this problem gets worse and worse with every generation. In Marx's time, they were worried about steam engines. But we're at the point where, this book was printed by Lulu, print on demand. Do you know how many workers were involved in making this book? Other than me, I mean, I wrote it with my creativity. But, in terms of when it was time to print this book, do you know how many workers were involved? One. There was one worker that was involved in this book. He pushed a button. Right? It's print on demand. They have a machine that makes books on demand. And so they had I submitted the PDF and the cover and all of that, and somebody bought it. And so one worker pushed one button and a machine went beep, 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 and this book popped out. 20 years ago, there would have been 100 workers involved in making this book. I remember a time where if you wrote a book, they had to print 5,000 copies of it. Do you remember this? They had to print 5,000 copies of a book, or else it wasn't cost effective. Book printers would not print any book unless there was at least 5,000 copies to be printed when they printed it. Do you remember this? Anyone who's been a writer, self-published, remembers this, right? There was a time, you go back to the 1990s, 1980s, if you wanted to get a book published, you went to the book publisher, and if you didn't put in an order for 5,000 books, they wouldn't touch it because it wasn't worth the cost. Now, they can print on demand one book because there's one worker involved in making it. This should be great. There's more stuff than there's ever been. It's easier to make stuff than it's ever been. In Marx's time, he was talking about the alienation of workers in factories. Those factories have closed down. There's still factories here and there, but in terms of getting jobs in factories, that's pretty much over. The robots have replaced the assembly line worker. And Marx is talking about how awful it is that the worker is reduced from being a craftsman to being an appendage of machine. In our time, we're talking about how machines have lost their appendages. That's what we're talking about. Machines have lost their appendages. And at this point, labor is really very limited. There's very little human labor that needs to be done. Now, we need people to sweep the streets, I guess. There's still plenty of jobs, but the amount of human labor that is involved in the process of production is lower than ever. Self-driving cars is hanging over the economy as a curse. And all of this brings us back to this point. This is an aside that Frederick Engels makes. But all the planned action of animals has never succeeded in impressing the stamp of their will on the earth that was left for man. Human beings are creative creatures. That's true. We as human beings, we create a civilization. We impress our will on the environment. Oh, that's an interesting point. And then they move on. Because at their time, they're talking about factory production. But then that brings me to another point, which I think I have to pull up. I think I think I have to pull this one up as well, right? Hold on. All right, and the critique of the Goethe program, which is one of the works that Marx wrote in the last years of his life. He writes the critique of the Goethe program, and he's explaining, these German socialists have gotten together and they wrote the Goethe program, explaining their views. And he looks at it and he says they got it all wrong. They don't understand any of this. And he critiques this Goethe program, and he writes this document about what socialism really means. And in that document, he talks about what the higher stage of communism is. What is the ultimate goal? What are we trying to achieve with society taking control of the means of production? What are we trying to do? So I'll put that on the screen. And he's explaining about how in a socialist society, there's plenty of inequality. And he's explaining about how we're not trying to redistribute wealth. And he says, first of all, we're not trying to redistribute wealth. That was one of the first points he makes in the book. And then from there, he goes on to explain what it is that we're trying to do. I will pull that up on the screen because all of this is very important. This is from the critique of the Goethe program. And in the critique of the Goethe program, this is what Marx writes. He starts talking about how in a socialist society, he says, one worker is married, another is not. One has more children than another, and so forth. Thus, with equal performance of labor, hence an equal social consumption fund, one will in fact receive more than another, and one will be richer than another, and so on. To avoid these defects, instead of being equal, would have to be unequal. And he's talking about how there's inequality, in a socialist society. He says, but these defects are inevitable in the first phase of communist society, as it is when it has just emerged from the prolonged birth pangs of capitalist society. Right can never be higher than the economic structure of society and its cultural conditions developed thereby. And then he goes on to say, in a higher phase of communist society, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to the division of labor, and therewith the antithesis between mental and physical labor has vanished. Now, that first thing, he's basically saying at the point where people don't have jobs anymore, right? Because if you have a job, right, that division of labor, that's what division of labor means. If your job is a bookkeeper, you keep the books. That is your division of labor. If your job is a street sweeper, you sweep the streets. But he's saying after we've eliminated jobs, the division of labor, people no longer have jobs. They're not necessary because there's, so much has been created because technology has advanced so much. After labor has become not only a means of life, but life's prime want. What is he talking about there? After labor has become not only a means of life, but life's prime want, meaning people only work because they want to do it, because they find fulfillment from doing it. People only do work they find fulfilling. Right? When labor is not only a means of life, but life's prime want. It's enjoyable. After the productive forces have increased, right? He's talking about huge technological development and the all-around development of the individual, meaning that you're free. Technology has advanced to the point you don't have a job because you can just do what you feel like doing, right? There's no specific individual job. There's no distinction between mental and physical labor because anyone can just do what they want because the division of labor has been gotten rid of. After the antithesis between mental and physical labor is gone, meaning that, whether you're a mental laborer or a physical laborer doesn't really matter because you can just do whatever you want. After labor has become life's prime want, not only a means of life, meaning that after it's at the point where you can just do what you feel like doing and you only work because you enjoy it, right? There's no obligation to work. You don't have to work. You do it to find fulfillment. After the productive forces have increased with the all-around development of the individual, and all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety, and society inscribe on its banners, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. So he's saying that eventually human creative power will get to the point that there is so much wealth and abundance created that we only do labor that gives us human fulfillment. That the only work that is necessary for you to do is work that makes you feel fulfilled. The only work that you will do is work that makes you feel like a creator, work that makes you feel like a builder, work that brings you satisfaction. Art will be much more important. Designing, building, people will work to find fulfillment. Right? There won't be individual jobs. People will wake up in the morning and say, oh, this is what I feel like doing today. Right? That is the kind of world that we're striving to create. And we're striving to create that by instituting rational planning of the means of production. And with rational planning of the means of production, we can increase technology, and at the same time, society will grow richer in the process, and human technology will advance, and the amount of wealth in society will also advance, and we'll be marching toward a world with so much wealth, and so much abundance, and so much freedom, and so much development of the individual, that the need for a government will fade away. That's the goal, right? Marxism, if you really look at it, as much as they didn't get it, right? I'm quoting to you Marx and Engels, the atheists. They are pointing toward human creative power and a definite distinction between humans and animals that defines human existence and drives us to constantly reach a higher plane, and is going to get us from our primitive existence when we did live as animals, as hunter-gatherers, all the way to higher communism. And that is what Marx is pointing to. And I see that, even though Marx and Engels didn't believe in God, I see that as the greatest confirmation of God's existence ever. Because what is God? God is the creator. God is the creator of all things. And every religion acknowledges that human beings and animals are not the same. We are not the same. Human beings have something that animals do not have. And what we have, what Marx and Engels pretty much discovered, is we have creativity. We have the ability, as Engels explained, to impress the stamp of our will upon the earth. Right? This is the brilliance, and that eventually we will create a society, if we can get beyond the irrationality of today, we will eventually create a society where that creativity is unleashed far beyond anything we can imagine. And we have changed the world around us so much, and our creative power has soared to the point that that just becomes what life is all about. Life is just about creating. And the alienation and the being chained to a machine and being degraded by a boss and all of that stuff is vanished. And that we can just live in harmony with each other, enjoying the beauty of our creative ability. That's what Marx was saying. So Marx, in his essence, was celebrating human creativity. He was saying that our creative power, our unique creative power, gives us the ability to do things, to reinvent, and we're eventually going to get to a world where that is all there is. And I'm telling you, with artificial intelligence now, with AI, all of this stuff is way, way more important than it has ever been. And there's a great book on fascism called Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt that applies this understanding to the Great Depression and explains the rise of Hitler. And there's a great book called The Psychology of Reaction by Reuben Osborne that applies this to psychology and explains the rise of fascism as a reaction to this society-wide crisis and the irrationality of the capitalist mode of production. And at the time of the 2008 financial crisis, I learned this theory from Fred Goldstein, who wrote a great book called Low Wage Capitalism. And he learned it from Sam Marcy, who wrote a great book called High Tech, Low Pay. And there's another great writer named Nelson Peary, and he wrote a great book called The Future is Up to Us. And now, in the age of Trumpism, I wrote a great book called Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution, and explained this as well. And this is exactly, and I heard this from Jack Ma, When I was in Russia, I went to a meeting where the first time I'd ever been in the same room as Russian President Vladimir Putin. I was at the Valday Discussion Club, and Jack Ma spoke on a panel with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Jack Ma explained everything that I'm explaining here. I heard it from Jack Ma, and he talked about artificial intelligence, and he talked about the worry and tech optimism and everything. And he laid it out, and I went ding, 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 ding. He didn't quote Marx anywhere in his speech. He didn't quote, but I knew exactly what he was talking about because I'd learned it from Fred Goldstein, and he'd learned it from Sam Marcy, and I'd read it from Nelson Peary, and they got it from Marx and Engels. And all of this stuff about technology and crisis and human labor being eliminated, and all of this understanding about why the Great Depression happened in the 1930s and why the Soviet Union was booming while the rest of the planet was having a Great Depression, why fascism arose and why Hitler emerged as a degrowther, creating a slave labor underclass and a military economy to try and deal with a crisis of overproduction. And why there was the great economic expansion after World War II, after almost all of the world, except for the United States, was blown up in a big, ugly war. And why there was a great economic expansion, but amid that economic expansion, the computer revolution happened. Because of Alan Turing's decoder machine, because of Apple, and because of decisions made by Brzezinski, and writing about the technotronic era. Because of all of this, human creativity continued marching forward. Human labor continued to be eliminated by technology, and now we're back in the same place we were in the 1930s, except it's a much deeper crisis. But that brings me to what I've also learned, which is why the socialist countries have changed. The fall of the Soviet Union was carried out by the creative people. They felt stifled. It was the scientists, the engineers, the filmmakers, the intellectuals, the writers, the college professors. Those are the people that overthrew socialism in the Soviet Union because they felt stifled, because they felt trapped, because there wasn't room for them. And the socialist system, where everyone works in a centrally planned economy, everyone's a government employee who gets a wage from the government, and the central figure of the country is Stalin, or a leader who motivates everyone to work. People that had new ideas felt stifled, felt crushed. It was a much more rationally organized economy where you didn't have gluts of overproduction, and they produced more steel than any other country in the world, more tractors than any other country in the world. But human creative power was being crushed because in their rapidly industrialized and heavily organized and regulated socialist society, there was not room for human creative power. And the West still had room for that. And so the West started whispering in the ears of the intellectuals and free thinkers and creative people, the people who wanted to be more creative, the people who wanted to invent things, the people who wanted to be innovators. And they turned against the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union it collapsed from within. But in 1976, Mao died, and Deng Xiaoping came into power. And Deng Xiaoping saw that those students, those writers, those scientists, those professors were feeling stifled. And he innovated. And he turned the Chinese communist or socialist system into a system that promoted those people, into a system that subsidized those people, into a system that empowered those people. And while the government ran the banks and the government controlled the major industries, the state unleashed the creativity of those people. They didn't have to become government employees in a government steel mill. They could go out and be creative. They could go out and start their own business in line with the socialist economy. And that model, that in Latin America, they call it 21st century socialism. In China, they call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. In Vietnam, they call it the socialist-oriented market economy. That model is very, very effective. I have been to Venezuela. One of the buildings that I went to when I went to Venezuela was called the Center for African Knowledge. And it's a building dedicated to the heritage of Afro-Venezuelans, Venezuelans whose heritage is from Africa. And one thing that I noticed is that the museum at the top, it's at the top of the building, but the rest of the building below it is a mall. It's a mall with all kinds of Afro-Venezuelans who have their own business. Well, Caleb, that's capitalism. That's capitalism. Now, is it? Because all those businesses are subsidized by the government. And the government controls the oil, the major natural resource of the country. And it uses that oil money to subsidize those businesses. And a lot of those businesses are cooperatives where all the employees own a share of the profits. But those businesses are subsidized and directed as part of an overall planned economy. But those women that designed handbags at the Center for African Knowledge, they designed them. They used their creativity. They had the idea, I want to start a handbag company. And I want to do it to help make Venezuela a more prosperous socialist society. So I go to the Venezuelan government and I arrange for them to give me a business subsidy. And they figured out a way that my idea of designing, more handbags, that could be in line with socialism. And so they gave me a subsidy and some direction. And now I'm here in the Center for African Knowledge, and I've got my store where I sell African handbags. It's still a planned economy. Profits are not in command, but people get to be creative. People get to invent. People get to change the world and find the fulfillment of doing creative labor, but they do it in a way where the major commanding heights of economic power are controlled by the government, by a revolutionary government that directs them and assigns them. And it's the same in Nicaragua with their micro-entrepreneurship program. Thousands of worker cooperatives, thousands of Nicaraguans have started their own business, but they get a subsidy from the government to do it. The government gives them a loan and gives them direction and helps them set it up. And they do it in a way that matches the goals of the Sandinista National Liberation Front, the ruling party. And it's very successful. Vietnam has many small business owners. And many Vietnamese people own their own business, start their own hotel, start their own restaurant, start their own product line, but they do it in a way that is coordinated with the government's plan for building a more prosperous Vietnam. The government helps them do it, gives them a subsidy and all of that, and directs them to do it. So it's not free market. And they make beautiful things. This model, this is 21st century socialism. And this model is very, very effective. Let people create, let people innovate. But let them do it in the context of a centrally planned economy. It has the strength of capitalism. Right? That was what the capitalists always had on the Soviet Union. But it also has abolished the anarchy of production. And that is the essence of what we are getting to. And again, if you just talk worker cooperatives all day, or if you talk about redistribution of wealth, you're missing the point. It's not about redistribution of wealth. That's not the point. Right? There's wealth redistribution in every society. It's not about redistributing wealth. It's about not having the anarchy of production, not having people become homeless because there are too many houses, not having people become hungry because there is too much food. It's about abolishing the chaos of the market and having a centrally planned economy. Right? This is, again, Engels. Engels, what does he say here? He says, with seizing the means of production by society, production of commodities is done away with, and simultaneously the mastery of the product over the producer. Anarchy in social production is replaced by systemic, definite organization. Well, that means we have individual worker cooperatives that do whatever they want and compete with each other, but they all share the profits. No! Anarchy in social production is replaced by systemic, definite organization. That's what socialism is. It is abolishing the chaos of the market. And then for the first time, in a certain sense, man, in a certain sense, is finally marked off from the rest of the animal kingdom and emerges from mere animal conditions into really human ones. The whole sphere of conditions of life, which environ man and have hitherto ruled man, now come under the dominion and the control of man, who for the first time becomes the real conscious lord over nature, because he has become the master of his own social organization. So what we constantly have the ability to do, to reinvent our environment, to force the environment to serve us, amplifies 1,000-fold, because our economy is rationally organized. And so as human beings, we have the ability to unleash our creative power to reinvent our relationship with nature on a level that we can't even imagine. We're no longer living at nature's whim. We can remake the world. Right? And then I love this particular quotation. I keep coming back to it because it really gets to the essence of what we're trying to get at. Engels. Hold on. He says, when once their nature is understood, they can, in the hands of the producing workers together, be servants, be willing servants. The difference is that between the destructive forces of electricity in the lightning and the storm, and electricity under the command of the telegraph or the Voltaire arc. It is the difference between a conflagration and fire working in the service of man. When this recognition at last of the real nature of the productive forces of today, the social anarchy of production gives place to a social regulation of production on a definite plan according to the needs of the community and each individual. Then the capitalist mode of appropriation, in which the product enslaves first the producer and then the appropriator, is replaced by the appropriation of the products that is based upon the nature of the modern means of production. Upon the one hand, direct social appropriation as a means of maintenance and expansion of production. On the other, direct individual appropriation. So what is he getting at here? Right now, the problem with our economy is not, well, some people have more money than others, Caleb. That's no fair. That is not the problem with the economy. Well, Caleb, there's some people who own the factory and some people who work in the factory, and that's no fair. That is not the problem. The problem is everything in our economy is done to maximize profits. So technology leads to poverty. So we have all kinds of homeless people and all kinds of empty houses. So we have a government. The government has to buy huge pounds and pounds of cheese and bury them in a cave to keep the price of dairy from going up. We live in a system where the more our creative power and technology advances, the poorer and more unstable everything's going to get. And so we have to replace the irrationality of the market with a conscious, definite plan. And that conscious, definite plan, public ownership of the banks, public control of our natural resources, mobilizing the public to build the infrastructure that's necessary for the economy, enacting an economic bill of rights where we invest in our population, but we also utilize the labor power of every human being. We provide healthcare to everybody so that people can be more productive. You reorganize the economy so that the government is controlling the economy overall in order to ensure economic growth. And that is like the difference between a wildfire and heating your home with a gas stove. That is the difference between lightning or static electricity and plugging in something in your house. We take all that chaotic power, all that chaotic energy in the market, and we have a powerful government, a government that serves the people, that forces that creative, energetic power and corrals it to serve an overall central plan of maximizing productivity. And as a result, living standards rise. And that is what every country that is under the boot of imperialism, in order to break free, has to do. And the first time, the way they did it, it was basic industrialization. And it was done with total state ownership. But they realized that system of total state ownership, it was very, very good for building the steel mills. It was very, very good for building the power plants. But once they got over that hurdle of industrialization, once they electrified the country, once they wiped out illiteracy, a problem set in, because people want to invent. People are ambitious. People want more than they already have. And that's what we're all about. We want more than we already have. We want so much wealth in society that the very need for a government fades away. We're not against wealth. We're not against creativity. God damn it, we are not against creativity. If anything, what we believe in is a celebration of human creativity. What we want is for the spark of creativity that God put into all of us to be unleashed to the fullest fulfillment of its possibilities. And right now we have a very, very irrational economic system that doesn't allow that. And it used to be that our economic system allowed for an alienated existence in industry. We could sell our labor power to a boss and then go home at the end of the day and have our lives and live this kind of alienated existence on the job. And that's gone. All we've got is our creativity. All we've got is our creativity. Let me just tell you this again. All we've got is our creativity. That's all we've got. And we live in a society where they're trying to crush our creativity. They are trying to crush your creativity. Video games are very bad for creativity because in video games, there's only one set of rules. In video games, you can only push 2 or 3 different buttons. You can't innovate to develop solutions in your video game. And that with modern technology and with degrowth, they are programming the next generation to not be creative. And I know so many people, many young people that are creative, that are creative, but they live in an environment where their creativity is stifled and crushed. And they want to go out and build, and they want to go out and create, and they want to write, they want to speak, they want to paint, they want to draw, they want to take their existence and they want to change the world around them, but they can't. And so they function as more and more of a robot at their job, and a job that may not even be around in 2 or 3 years, or at least 2 or 3 decades. And with their creativity being crushed, the only way it can come out is bitterness. The only way it can come out is bitterness. Anger, aggression at other people, tearing other people down, jealousy, resentment. That's all they've got. They're put into a box. They're taught that the world is a video game where you can only push this button or push that button. You can't really do anything else. You can't innovate and invent your way out of a crisis. And they're put into a box, and they're stuck in this box. Society puts them into a box, and they're stuck in this box. And the only way they can let any of it out is just by hurting other people, by being jealous, by being resentful, by putting other people down, and it's an awful way to live. It's an awful way to live. But that's what the system is offering with their high-tech dark ages. That's what they're offering you, right? A miserable existence as a button pusher. A button pusher whose only fulfillment is getting on Facebook and cyberbullying or canceling somebody or sitting with your coworkers and making fun of some disabled person or something like that. That's what they're offering you. Or being jealous of somebody. That's going to be the only outlet for your emotions. That's what they're offering us. This is a nightmare. And this is not what I see when I go to Russia. This is not what I see when I go to Nicaragua. This is not what I see when I go to other societies. I see a government that's constantly saying, you know, when I go to Russia, I go to these youth gatherings and I sit there with the highest math scorers and the best athletes and all of that. And the Russian government is saying to them, think of something you can do to make Russia better. Think of your own project. Think of your own vision of how Russia can be stronger. And we'll subsidize it and we'll find a way to fit it into our overall national plan, but we need you to innovate. I go to Nicaragua with the young people there with their slogans, grow where you are planted. And they're saying to their young people, think of a project that you can initiate that will make Nicaragua a stronger country. And we can help you do it, and we can connect you with people. We can give you a government subsidy, but you need to think of something to innovate. This is insanity. This is the exact opposite of what they told us communism was. Amazon is what they tell us communism is. Communism is supposed to be a giant factory where you are just a robot and you just follow orders, no creativity, you must obey, and the great leader is at the top. That's Amazon. That's Amazon. Amazon turns you into a robot. Amazon prevents you from innovating and being creative. Working in an Amazon warehouse is what they told you communism was. And communism, or 21st century socialism, or whatever they call it nowadays, whatever you want to call it, is what they told us capitalism was. Well, capitalism, Caleb, is where anyone can just have an idea, and with their brilliance, they change the world. And it's about, that's what's happening in the communist countries. And in the capitalist countries, we're at Amazon, where we can't even take a pee break. We're not even allowed to be creative enough to take a pee break. And we just have to be robots, do what your boss tells you to do. This is the weirdness of the time we're living in. Capitalism is deteriorating into high-tech fascism. And 21st century socialism has gotten us over this hurdle. I'm telling you all, this school of thought that I am articulating to you right now, it took me a long time to piece it all together. And I learned and I traveled and I saw things and I learned things, and this is really important. And it actually says a lot about social organizations. And I'm not going to touch on that too much tonight. I'll probably talk a lot about that in my speeches and classes in Chicago, because I think we're going to have a couple interactive sessions, and then I'll give a closing speech in Chicago. And I'm going to touch on what this means, but we have to have socialist groups operate in a different way. And when I look at the Uhuru movement and how successful they are, I look at other organizations I've observed, I've figured this out. And when I went to Venezuela and I understood how Bolivarian where Bolivarian socialism worked and how it's different than the Soviet Union. I figured it out. And when I go to the World Youth Festival and I listen to the sessions there with the Young Communist League of Vietnam and the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union, and I listen to Putin and I listen to Sergei Lavrov and I listen to these government officials talk and how they talk to the young people and what they encourage them to do, I figured it out. I figured it out. Okay? I'm not saying I know everything, but I figured it out. And you can't organize a socialist group the way that they used to be organized. It won't work. Right? And there's a reason that the Workers' World Party was dying. It was dying. Right? And I saw that they were dying, and I was furious that they were dying. And they, even though I was their most loyal, dedicated recruit, and I was willing to put up with a lot more of, the bullshit than other people were. They just couldn't even handle me. I was too creative to be in the group. There's an old way of doing things. There's an old way of doing things, and it's not going to work anymore. And if you look at organizations in our time that are growing, they function in a certain way. And I was talking on the phone with Peter Coffin today, and I was talking with Chairman O'Malley in Florida, and I was observing different groups, talking with churches, talking with different organizations, seeing social society. I figured this out. I figured it out. And I'm not saying I have figured out everything. There's always nuances. There's always mistakes. But I've figured a lot out. And some of the problems we've had in CPI, I figured it out. And we have to get to the point that we recognize that what we are doing, what is happening around the world in the new rising economy, and what we are advocating, and the message of CPI is very different than what has come before. And I must say that it is my creativity that keeps me going. It is my creativity and my determination to impact the world and to create. That's what keeps me going. And there's a reason. Years ago, I never thought we were, pioneering new ground. And honestly, we may not be, globally speaking, but for the United States and for political groups in the United States, we definitely are paving new ground here. But as I realized that we're paving new ground, as I realized that we are innovating and all of that, I realized that, I gave this group a name, the Center for Political Innovation. Why did I pick that name? Because I kind of knew this all along. I didn't want to form another communist group. When I was out of the Workers' World Party, a bunch of people messaged me, "Are you going to start your own communist group, Caleb? I would join it." I thought, no, I'm not going to form my own communist group. I'm not going to form the Workers' Combat Fight Back Revolutionary Party. That'd be silly. I knew when I formed Students and Youth for a New America, and later I formed the Center for Political Innovation, that I was doing something different. I was doing something different. And what I was doing was about unleashing human creativity. And that's what we're doing here. This is not a fandom, and this is not an ego trip. This is about creating a center that will cultivate political innovation. Right? There's an old joke. This was a joke in the Workers' World Party years ago. That, they were having a rally, and their group was called Youth Against War and Fascism. And a news reporter stopped them and he said, "Youth Against War and Fascism, tell me," on live TV, "tell me, what is Youth Against War and Fascism?" And the person said, "Well, we're youth, and we're against both war and fascism." It's kind of funny, but what is CPI? Well, we're a center, and we believe in political innovation. Who'd have guessed? Who would have guessed? That's what we are. We're a center for political innovation. Who would have ever guessed that's what we are? But that's what we are. If you go to our website, our name is the Center for Political Innovation. And what we are is we are a center for political innovation. That's what we are. And our worldview is based on innovation. It is celebrating human creativity. And obviously, we are not for the billionaire monopolies that dominate the world. Obviously, we're not for the imperialists. But we don't exactly have that whole workers and the bosses thing. We have it a little bit. Obviously, we support labor unions. We want people to be treated better on the job, right? We want to resist the power of the ultra rich. But the whole worker boss thing, right? It's not the whole story. That was a really, really important thing in Marx's day, and it's still a really important thing, but it's not the whole story. It's not the whole story. The story is human creative power and how it has exceeded the narrow limits of a system where production is organized to make profits. That's the whole story. That's the whole story. Our goal is not simply to take the factory that you work at and make you a co-owner of that factory. And our goal is not even to take that factory that you work at and make it part of a state central plan where you work at it. Our goal is to create a society where you don't have to work at that factory ever again, where machines work at that factory, and that's fine because you're 10 times richer than you were when you were working at that factory. Nowadays, if you work at that factory, having a machine come in and do your job is a nightmare. That means that you're laid off. It means you're unemployed. But we want to create a society where nobody's working in the factory. The machines are working at the factory, and you're painting pictures all day. And you're drawing beautiful artwork all day. And you wake up every day and go, what do I feel like doing today? What can I do today to find fulfillment? And you spend your life developing really meaningful relationships with your family and with your friends. And you learn to really care and love for other people in your life and the way you do it is by engaging in creative work with them. That is what we are trying to do, right? We're not just trying to resolve the worker boss thing. We are trying to unleash creativity from the trap of a system where profit is in command. That is the innovationist school of thought. And that has always been what has driven me, is my intellectual curiosity, my refusal to accept certain things, and my desire to create. And I want you to find and cultivate the desire to create within yourself, because I see so many people who have had their inner creativity crushed. There are so many people who've had their inner creativity crushed, and I want to create an organization and a movement that in the name of fighting imperialism, in the name of opposing war, in the name of standing up for human love and brotherhood, we unleash people's creative power to build beautiful things. That is what I am striving to create. That is what I am building. That is my mission. And that is what I'm all about. And I have figured out, I have taken Marxism and I've taken what's good from it. And I've left the bad. The satanic rebellion, the ruthless criticism of all in existence. I don't have any need for that. I don't have any need to deny God. And I think that this creative power is the biggest proof of God's existence that has ever been. It is God by definition. God is the creator, and this creative power that we have, when God breathed life into man, that's what he breathed into us. And so I don't have a desire to rebel against everything. I don't have a desire to tear everything down. I don't have a desire to incite people to be hostile to each other. I really don't have any use for jealousy. I really have no use for jealousy. Jealousy is the idea that jealousy got wrapped up with socialism. That, I mean, that's what most people think socialism is. They think socialism is a mass movement of jealousy. It's a mass movement of people who think it's unfair that some people have more than others. And if that's what we are, we should give up, because that is a mindset that it's never going to get you any place good in life. You'll never go any place good in life if you're thinking that way, and you will never go any place good in life if that is your motivation, right? Wanting to change the world so that people can have it good, wanting to end a situation where people are harming other people or gaining at other people's expense, that's good. But jealousy, get rid of it. Get rid of jealousy. Jealousy doesn't do you any good. Jealousy doesn't do you any good. Resentment doesn't do you any good. And that is what leftism has been reduced to. All the economics that I just shared with you, they don't ever talk about in socialist groups now. Tomorrow morning, I'm debuting a video, and it's a video of a conversation we had on these streams about how socialist groups became wokeified. Wokeism is all the evil, all the negative things that you found in communism and Marxism. All the jealousy, all the resentment, all the desire for destruction, all the desire. That's what wokeism is. Wokeism, it's we're in this weird period where you got to imagine that this is what people don't get. Everything divides. Everything divides. One must always divide into two. And during the Cold War, Marxism divided. And the imperialists started cultivating the very, very evil parts of Marxism. And on top of that, the socialist countries started downplaying, and they got past the very, very evil parts of Marxism. They said the Cultural Revolution was awful. They said we need a market sector. We need people to be creative to make socialism work. We can't just have everyone work at a state-run industry. That's not going to work. And they figured this out. Communism divided, and socialism that exists in the world today, the anti-imperialist economies, where they're desperate to have creativity, where they're mobilizing to build, and the dying Western societies where there's Marxism everywhere now all of a sudden. It used to be a crime to be a Marxist. Nobody was a Marxist. You must be an idiot if you believe in Marxism. Everybody knows. Everybody knows Marxism doesn't work. But now all of a sudden Marxism is everywhere, but it's not real Marxism. It's, did you know that white people have it better off than black people? Doesn't that make you mad? Did you know that men have it better than women? Doesn't that make you mad? Did you know some people have more money than other people? Doesn't that make you mad? You want to go burn something? Let's go burn something. Yeah. And let's go find somebody on the internet who's got more than us and hurt them. Yeah. All right. Let's go. That's what Marxism has turned into. And to some extent, it was always that. And that was always a problem. And the socialist countries of the world have realized, yeah, that ain't getting us nowhere. And they really indulged that stuff during the Cultural Revolution in China. You better believe it. And they really indulged it at certain parts of the 20th century. And it did not have good results. And so they've actually gotten rid of it. But now in the West, they've got a Marxism that has no understanding of economics. There's no call for central planning economy. It's just resentment incorporated with social media, and they're just on there all the time. Did you know that somebody somewhere had said something wrong? Doesn't that make you mad? Don't you want to go harm them? I mean, it's a lot like anti-Semitism. What is anti-Semitism? I've said this before. What is anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitism, like classic anti-Semitism. I'm not talking about people now that are talking about the role of the Israel lobby. I'm talking about like in the medieval Europe, and especially I'm talking about in the 1800s in Europe. There was widespread belief that Jews were no good, that Jews were bad, that the Catholic Church promoted some of this, and the term anti-Semitism originated in the 1800s. What was that movement of people getting together and talking against Jews? What was it? It was really an ethnic, racial, religious attempt to give justification to the resentment of working class people against the middle class, not against the ultra rich who actually ran society, but against the middle class. That's what it was. If you look at it, classic anti-Semitism. What it is that a Jew, the stereotypes about Jews are all stereotypes about middle class people, right? If you think about it, and somebody who works as a wage worker, and somebody who owns their own business, owns their own practice as a doctor or a lawyer, owns their own store, they are going to interact with the world differently. That's just a fact, right? For example, what is the most common stereotype against Jews? As they say, well, Jews are stingy with their money. They're cheap. Well, if you own your own business, you have to be that way. Think about it, right? If you're a factory worker and you have a job, you get paid every week, every 2 weeks. So you can spend your money when you got it, whatever. But if you own your own business, you might get 10 times more than that factory worker. But you have to think about, what am I going to spend, because I need to put everything back into my business. So you're going to be way tighter with your money. The way you interact with your money is going to be different, because you're constantly going to be thinking, how can I expand my enterprise? You can't just go out and party and spend your money and then go back to work. And a working class person might look at a middle class person and say, look, you got 10 times more money than I am, but you're so cheap. That is working class resentment against the middle class. And that's going to be true for all middle class people. It's not true to Jews. And there's plenty of Jewish factory workers who it doesn't apply to, but that is the stereotype. The stereotype of the Jew was the stereotype of a middle class person. Another thing, working class people, because they're working on the assembly line, they're working in the factory, often they don't want to know. And that's not a good thing, but it's just the reality, right? You want to go to work, pay your bills, and take care of everything. And so, somebody comes along and says, hey, homosexuality, some people are born gay and all. You don't want to hear that. You just want to go to work and pay your bills. Right. And a lot of working class people can be pretty close-minded, because in order to get through life, they can't make room for it. They just have to focus on getting to work, getting their kids, and especially if they're struggling, if they're low rank, they don't have time to hear about it. They don't want to put the glasses on. But middle class people, they want to learn about different ideas and different religions and different morality. And let's explore all these things. And so, a working class person might look at a middle class person and say, they're weird. They're into, weird stuff. They're not as ethical and moral as I am. Well, these are class differences, right? And the stereotypes about Jews, there are almost exactly the same as the stereotypes about ethnically Chinese people in the Pacific, right? If you go to Malaysia, if you go to Indonesia, there's a lot of ethnically Chinese people, and they have the exact same stereotypes about them. They're all cheap, and they have all the money, and they're tight with their money, and they're greedy, and they're all communists, and they're all sexual degenerate. It's the same stereotypes. Why? Because they're middle class. The ethnically Chinese people in Indonesia, the ethnically Chinese people in Malaysia, the ethnically Chinese people throughout the Pacific are middle class, because the Chinese were the traders, right? The Chinese had the ships and they were the traders. And even though, until recently there was no talk of Jews, there was this whole stereotype, and that is what classic anti-Semitism is. classic anti-Semitism is working class resentment against the middle class because they can see the middle class, right? If you're a factory worker, you can see the lawyer in your neighborhood. You can see the factory. You can see the store owner in your neighborhood. You can see people in your neighborhood who are middle class and have more than you. You cannot see the ultra rich. The big banks, the big monopolies, they don't walk through your neighborhood. Jeff Bezos doesn't walk through your neighborhood. No, I mean, the Rockefellers don't walk through your neighborhood. It is resentment against the people who have 10 or 20% more than you, who you can see. And the main thing about anti-Semitism, and this is one thing I've argued with people, pointing out, there's no solution. There's no solution in anti-Semitism. None. It's just there's this other group of people and they've got more than you and they're different than you, and doesn't that make you mad? And there's no solution. To do that, how are you going to end white supremacy? I'm waiting. How are you going to end white supremacy? Well, I'm going to get really mad about it, and I'm going to yell at people about it. Is that going to end white supremacy? Oh, end patriarchy. How are you going to end patriarchy? Well, we're going to yell at all the men that are patriarchal, and no, you're not going to end patriarchy. And there's no solution there. There's no policy that you can implement to address these things, to address some people having it better than others. Right? There's no real policy they can implement. It's just about getting mad, be angry. What? Oh, men have it better than women. They do. So be really mad at them and tell them and make them get up and say it. And how does that make things better? Right? Oh, white people have it better than black people. They do. That's factually true. And that's for awful, historical, unfair reasons. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to be really mad about it. That's what we're going to do. Well, is that going to fix things? And that's what wokeism is, right? And anti-Semitism is the same thing, right? First of all, it projects this notion that one ethnic group or whatever has all the power and one ethnic group is the source of all evil in the world. Okay. Let's say for the sake of argument, that's true. What do we do about it? Well, we get mad about. Okay, what do we name them? We say it. Okay, how does that fix things? Well, we just let everyone know that they're the problem, and then everyone will know that they're the problem. How does that fix anything? It's not about fixing anything, right? And that's the problem. Wokeism and anti-Semitism, it's really the same mindset. There's this group of people that is different than us that has all the power, so let's get mad about it, and it's a waste of time. It doesn't change anything, right? I mean, wokeism and anti-Semitism are really the same mindset. That's all they are, right? Is find somebody who you think has more power, more influence than you, and get really mad at them. And let everyone know that you are mad about them having more power, more influence, or a better life than you. Yeah, just be resentful of some group. Some visible group, not the system itself. No. And don't propose any policies that can actually change the system. No. Just find some group out there that you think has it better than you, or you think has too much power and influence, and get really mad at them. And that is not going to help anything. Right? That is a really problematic way of being. And that's why it was so useful in building a fascist movement in Germany. Oh, let's just stir up people's anger. That's why it's so useful. That's why it's so useful to them. Right? And, if you want to mobilize some kind of awful movement to create degrowth, if you want to mobilize a bunch of people to go out and hurt a bunch of people or tear things down or burn things down, yeah, stoke up their resentment. That'll do it. But don't think about building a group of people that are going to help each other based on resentment. That's not going to work. Don't think about building a group of people that are going to come up with policies that will actually make the country better. That's not going to work. You don't build a movement that makes the world a better place with resentment. You don't. You don't build a world that build a movement that makes the world a better place with resentment. That just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Okay? And we learned that. Marxism learned that. And Marxism was not about simply stoking resentment. I just read to you. It was about controlling the means of production. But there was a huge amount of embracing people's anger, embracing. So anyway, I've been over all of this. Listen, folks, it's getting late. So let's do the roll call, and then I'll answer your super chats, and then we'll call it a night. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations, folks. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Zach in Barcelona, Joe in North Carolina, Jenny in Cincinnati. We got Phil in Brooklyn in the house, St. David's, Bermuda, Rice in Adelaide, Australia, Alexander in Phoenix, Arizona, Terry in Portland is with us. Good to have you, Terry. As always, go subscribe to Terry's channel. Fujian in China, Auckland, New Zealand, Dan in the LA area, also as seen in They Live. We just found out. Bendigo, Australia, David Fax, Patrick in Maine, Ryan in Kansas City. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Denver, Colorado. Very, very good. Pritish in India. Welcome, Pritish. Anway in India. Wow, India is well represented tonight. Welcome, good sir. He made a great morning message, by the way. Anway did a great morning message. Mosen in Denver. Ryan in Kansas City. Patrick in Maine. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. The Seasoned Noob in China. Welcome, Seasoned Noob. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? E from Los Angeles. Very, very good. Welcome, E. I had an ancestor whose name was Elkanah Elhana, and people called him EE. I learned this. I did a genealogy project when I was in school, and they mentioned that, one of my ancestors, my family came from Ireland many years ago. And one of the early ancestors, if you trace my ancestor, there was a man named Elkanah Elhana and EE. So there we go. Jack in Pierce, Arizona. Elliot in Austin, Texas. Reed from Quincy, Illinois. Welcome, Reed. Good to have you with us. Chicago. Hope to meet people at the workshop. Yes, it's going to be good. I haven't ignored you. Don't be heartbroken, Russia. Don't be heartbroken. I'm here for you. Fred. Guy in Quincy is near me. Very good. Well, say hi to Guy. Very, very good. You ought to contact Gavin, Guy, because Gavin might be able to give you a lift to the workshop. Interesting, says E. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Very good. Glad you got recognized. Work in progress in Ottawa. So there we go. My grandfather was JB, and when asked what the letters stood for, he said JB. There you go. All right. Right? There we go. All righty. Matthew Fillingham in North Carolina. Conrad in Poland. Very, very good. All right. So, folks, I have had a number of people ask me lately, what can I do to support you and the work that you're doing? Because CPI right now doesn't formally exist, right? We are informally operating. We dissolved our nonprofit in the state of Oregon, and we're not formally incorporated. So what can I do to support you? Well, there are a couple different things you can do if you would like to support me. One thing that you can do, if you would like, is you can send me a contribution on Cash App, right? My Cash App is Caleb Maupin 22. Shout out to the two people who did help me out on Cash App yesterday. Caleb Maupin 22 on Cash App. That's one way that you can If you want to just support me and the work that I do, boom, go for it. That's one way you can help me. Another way, that you can just help me if you want to help me, you can Zelle me, right? A lot of people use Zelle with their bank or whatever, and you can Zelle my email address if you want to help me. Zelle to Caleb Maupin at Gmail. Right? So that's another way you can help me. If you want to help me, just Zelle Caleb Maupin at Gmail. Right? That's me. That's me if you want to send me a Zelle gift. And another thing, some people, they say, well, Caleb, we don't want to help you out in particular. We want to help out CPI. Aha. Well, if that's the case, we've got something for you. I don't run it. I have no access to it. It's being handled by Peter K. and Peter Coffin. Peter K. and Peter Coffin have set up a GoFundMe. They've set up a GoFundMe for our convention that we're doing next summer. They set it up, and it's great. We've already raised $475 for the convention that we are doing next summer. So you can contribute to the convention fund, because that convention next summer is going to be important. And we're doing it in the Chicago area. That's why I'm headed to Chicago pretty soon to start getting the ball rolling, months and months in advance. We got to get in outreach mode. So the convention fund is on GoFundMe. And if you would like to do that, it's also linked down below in the description. It's another way that you can help me out. That is another way that you can help me out. So yeah, I mean, people are asking how they can help me out. We are having a workshop in Chicago, and that workshop is coming up October 12th, and we would like as many people as possible to come to the workshop. And we are in the process of making the registration form, and Peter is in the process of making a beautiful poster for it. And, we would love you to come. As of now, this is what we've got. So if you'd like to come, Working Families First, Build the Economy, Not the Empire. October 12th, all-day workshop in the Chicago area. You can send me an email if you would like to come to the workshop. And then, formal registration will come soon. Right now, you can send me an email. So that was just, if you want to help me out, if you want to get involved in what we're doing, right? Things are in a weird time right now. A lot is up in the air and all of that. But you all are the reason I keep doing this. You are my community, and I love all of you, and what we do here is really, really specific. What will be the end for these monopolistic corporations? Well, the end will be when we establish a government of action that fights for working families and puts them all into public ownership, and they become the property of the people. That'll be the end, right? And we are not against businesses. We're not against creativity. We're against ultra monopolies that are propped up by the state, right? Facebook should be nationalized. It's basically government property anyway. Twitter should be nationalized. All of us should have access to it. If the government is propping up a corporation, why shouldn't we own it, right? I shouldn't own your store, right? I shouldn't own your bar or your restaurant that you put your creative soul into. But if my government that I elect and my tax dollars are propping up Amazon, I should own Amazon. I should have a share of Amazon, shouldn't I? Right? If my government and my tax dollars are propping up ExxonMobil, I should have a share of it. If I'm a citizen of America and the oil that ExxonMobil is making money off of comes from ExxonMobil, I should own ExxonMobil, right? I mean, the ultra monopolies, the huge monopolistic corporations that dominate our economy, that is our issue. And it's not just our economy, they dominate the world, right? They are the imperialists. We are against imperialism, right? We want to end the rule of the world by these monopolistic corporations that are trying to enact degrowth so they can stay at the top. And instead, we want a government of action that fights for working families. I got to put Huey Long on. I really do, because his policies were not exactly what we advocate. Okay. I'll admit that. All right. His policies that he advocated, he didn't exactly advocate what we advocate. Okay. But Huey Long, the great, Louisiana politician, if you listened to his rhetoric And if you looked at what he did, the way he kind of built a coalition in the state of Louisiana against the big monopolies. He built a coalition against the big monopolies in the state of Louisiana, and he started subsidizing and empowering small businesses. What he enacted in the state of Louisiana is kind of like, what we're trying to do here. It's kind of like what Venezuela has done. It's kind of like what Gaddafi did in Libya. I mean, it's, he used heavy taxation of the big oil monopolies to fund the businesses and create a lot of government jobs. And if you look at what he did, right, the movement that he built in Louisiana, which was mostly a rural state, right? It was kind of what we're talking about here. So I will put on Huey Long. I could listen to this man talk forever, right? This is the way this is the kind of understanding people need to hear.
According to the tables which we have assembled, it is our estimate that 4% of the American people own 85% of the wealth of America, and that over 70% of the people of America don't own enough to pay the debts that they owe. How many men ever went to a barbecue and would let one man take off the table what's intended for 9/10 of the people to eat? The only way you'll ever be able to feed the balance of the people is to make that man come back and bring back some of that grub he ain't got no business with. Now, how are you going to feed the balance of the people? What's Morgan and Baruch and Rockefeller and Mellon going to do with all that grub? They can't eat it. They can't wear the clothes. They can't live in the house. Give them a yacht. Give them a palace. Send them to Reno and give them a new wife when they want it. If that's what they want. But when they've got everything on the God's living earth that they can eat and they can wear and they can live in, and all that their children can live in and wear and eat and all their children's children can use, then we got to call Mr. Morgan and Mr. Mellon and Mr. Rockefeller back and say, come back here. Put that stuff back on this table here that you took away from here, that you don't need. Leave something else for the American people to consume. And that's the program. We're not going to destroy the Gulf Refining Company. We're not going to destroy the Standard Oil Company. But we're going to say that the limit of any one man's stock ownership in the Standard Oil Company is from $3 to $5 million to that individual, and that the balance of the people of America own the balance of what the Standard Oil Company is worth. All right. Then we start from the bottom, that the 25 or more million American families shall have a homestead, a home, and the comforts of a home, including an automobile and a radio, the things it takes in that house to live on. We say to America, 125 million, none shall be too big, none shall be too poor, none shall work too much, none shall be idle. No luxurious mansions empty, none walking the streets, none impoverished, none in pestilence, none in want, but in the land blessed by the smile of the Creator, with everything to be consumed, to be eaten, to be worn, that America will become a land sharing the fruits of the land, not for the favored few, not to satisfy greed, but that all may live in a land in which the Lord has provided an abundance sufficient for the luxury and convenience of the people in general, I think.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. I love Huey Long. I absolutely love that man. All right. Do you have any thoughts on neo-reactionary movements that have found support with people like Peter Thiel? Look, it's clear. I said in the opening of this stream, it looks like our election coming up is going to be a referendum on the Ukrainians. There is a faction in our ruling class, let's be real, that is against the Ukrainians, which is good, but is super pro-Israel. Okay? And that exists, right? And, they think that the mainstream Democrat Party is holding back Israel. They also think that, Russia, because many of the right-wing Netanyahu supporters speak Russian, and, that Russia could be aligned with Israel. And, there is a very big faction. That's why RFK, talks amazingly about Ukraine and Russia, but when he talks about Israel, it's a nightmare. Well, that's because he's being backed by those people, right? And, and there's many different layers to it. But there is a large layer of people in the ruling class that are pro-Israel and don't care about Ukraine. And, and I think a lot of lower level capitalists are like this, right? In New York City, a lot of the property in Brooklyn and in Queens and other places is owned by Israelis. Literal Israelis. I'm not saying Jews. I'm saying Israelis. Israeli citizens own a big percentage of the apartment buildings and stuff. And I think a lot of those folks, they're wealthy capitalists who own apartment buildings, but they're not the monopolies. They're not, they're not ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron, and they probably don't care that much about Ukraine. Right? They just want Israel to, murder all the Palestinians and Israel can do no wrong. We're in a weird spot. One thing I would encourage you to do is that if you meet somebody who, I feel like there's going to be a lot of Trump supporters in this space very soon, who they become, Ukraine pilled, so to speak, right? They get it because, a Ukrainian just tried to kill Trump and all of that. But they still have a hang up against China. They still have a hang up against Iran. Right? They still have a pro-Israeli hang up. You have to piece it all together for them. You have to just agree with them about what we agree on, and then you have to slowly nudge them to see that Russia is right in Ukraine, and Russia really likes China. Russia is right in Ukraine, and Russia's been really supportive of the Palestinians, and they support Iran. And you gotta use whatever opening. This is you gotta bond with people, and then you got to use whatever opening there is to get in there. And that's what I advise you to do. Thank you for your super chat. Thank you for your super chat. I'm glad you like what I have to say. I'm doing my best here. Nobody streams as much as me, and I am proud of what I do. Have a great stream, Caleb. Not a communist, but appreciate you. Well, we're innovationists. I mean, we are communists in the sense that we understand it, right? But we're not in the sense that most people are. We're at the point we don't use that word. It's a whole nother speech I can give another time. Have you ever heard of Sergei Kurganyan? I have not, but I'm going to Google him now. I would usually just say, nope, not heard of it. But now I owe you more than that. Sergei. Okay, no. All right. Kurganyan. Oh, okay. Kurganyan. Sergei Kurganyan, Russian politician. Okay. Russian politician, political scientist, and theater producer. He is the founder of the Russian neo-Soviet movement, The Essence of Time. Interesting. Okay. He was born in Moscow, Gorky Institute. Okay. I have heard of The Essence of Time. I have heard of that. That's interesting. Okay. That's interesting. According to Alexander Dugin, Kurganyan is a traitor and is working for oligarchs. Donbass insurgent Pavel Gubarev whacked Kurganyan in the face, and another Donbass insurgent, Alexander Borodai, promised to shoot Kurgan to death. Damn, okay. Well, I don't know anything about this guy. It's interesting. I'm kind of surprised to hear that my ideas are similar to his. Okay. I mean, it sounds like this guy is very heavily involved in internal Russian stuff that I don't know about, and I don't take any sides, right? I'm reading stuff here. Look, that's one thing. I don't take sides in Russia's politics. And, I don't take sides in Iran's politics. I don't take sides in, other than opposing imperialism, I don't take sides in anti-imperialist countries' politics. And I've learned you don't do that, right? In Russia, there are contradictions. There are the Putin movement and the Putin, coalition, right? They've got the Communist Party, you've got the Liberal Democrat Party and all that. And there's a lot of disagreement, right? I mean, they're all united at this point to defend their homeland and all of that, but there's contradictions there, and I stay out of that. And I've learned that. That's what you do, right? And when I was in Iran, there was a lot of Iranians who wanted me to, talk against Rouhani, and they're like, oh, he's a moderate. And I said, nope, not going to do it. There's a lot of Iranians who wanted me to shill for Rouhani. Oh, talk about why we need the Iran nuclear. I just said, not going to do it. That's not what I'm here to do. Whenever I was in Iran, they would ask me, what should we sign the Iran nuclear deal? I would say, I don't know. That's up to Iran. All right. And in China, the same thing. In Nicaragua, I heard a lot of Nicaraguans and Venezuelans. There's different factions and all of that. I am against the pro-imperialist people in those countries. And I will argue with the rich kids of Tehran or the stupid Navalny kids who, hate their own country and all that. But I'm not going to take sides there are contradictions. Look, these countries have problems. I mean, I think we can be honest about that. The anti-imperialist countries are not perfect. They have a lot of problems, and they're starting from a much lower level of development than the West is. And it's complicated. And whenever the government is giving subsidies to people and handing out stuff, there's going to be ways that it gets handed out that people are not going to be happy about. And but I've learned you just stay out of that stuff, right? And often you don't really know the whole story because, for me this person you just mentioned, Sergei Kurganyan, I know Dugin doesn't like him, but other people, I don't know anything about him, right? And like, if I talk to you, you would give me your opinion and all of that. And one mistake that people make, I'm from here. I don't read Russian and all of that. So you could come to me and you could be like, oh, this guy is whatever. And I would only have talked to you, and that's all I would know. But if I could speak Russian, and if I could read Russian and I could read all the things, I might have a totally different take on it. So, I've learned that in anti-imperialist countries, obviously I oppose the pro-imperialist faction. I'm anti-Navalny. Navalny is a piece of shit. All right. But other than being anti-Navalny, among people that are in the Putin camp, that are in are supporting their country and the Donbass and all that, among them, there's big disagreements among them about all kinds of things. I don't meddle in that. I don't meddle in that. And in China, right? I'm for the Communist Party of China. I think they're doing great things to raise their people up, but there's different factions and disagreements. Staying out of it, right? There's a group of people in China that are getting funding from America and saying overthrow the Chinese Communist Party. I'm against them. But other than that, I'm staying out of it. And the same for any anti-imperialist country. Venezuela, I was there. I saw that, I remember, well, anyway, I've seen big disagreements, in the Maduro camp. There's many different factions among Maduro's, movement. And the United Socialist Party, there's a bunch of other smaller parties that align with them. There's many factions in the United Socialist Party. I stay out of that. It's not my place. I support anti-imperialism. And as somebody who lives in America, the center of imperialism, that is the most important thing they can get from me is opposing imperialism. That's what they need from me. And if I get too wrapped up in the internal contradictions of these countries, then my ability to just oppose imperialism in the West becomes compromised. Then I'm suddenly wrapped up and like, what if the faction I don't support gets, you can't do that. You can't do that. All right. So interesting. All right. What's the motto of the organization as an innovationist? Well, the motto we've been using is we need a government of action to fight for working families. And we also have the Pledge of Unity that we recite on every Zoom call. We start every event with the Pledge of Unity. That's generally what we do. We talk about out of the movement to the masses, right? Out of the movement to the masses. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Those are the two slogans I've repeated on here the most. And then we have the Pledge of Unity. We pledge that we shall remember this unity, forged at the end of the Second World War, not only today, not only this year, this week, but always, until we have built the world we have dreamed of and fought for. We pledge ourselves to build the unity of the people of the world, all races, all colors, all nationalities, all beliefs, to eliminate all traces of fascism from the earth, to build a deep, just, lasting peace, to eliminate want, frustration, and enforced idleness. We've come to confirm the unity of all people, to salute our comrades who have died, and to pledge our word that skillful hands, keen brains, and bold enthusiasm shall never more be wasted in war. We start every CPI meeting with the Pledge of Unity, and that is our Pledge of Unity. Don't be bitter, be better. Yes, and don't compete, create. And go and read some Wallace Wattles. I love Wallace Wattles. All right, folks. It's almost 1 a.m. here, and I am so thankful to all of you for being here, for all the support that you've given me. And, this is a weird time for me. I'm in a weird spot right now, but whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. So, and I know that you all are with me wherever I go, and that this project has really grown in the last few months. Our mission and our purpose and our vision has astronomically matured, and I feel amazing about that, and that we are going to keep marching forward. So I'm going to put on the closing music, and we'll be back tomorrow morning. There's going to be a morning message like always, but we're also going to I'm premiering a video I made about it's a clip from these streams about wokeism and stuff like that. So anyway, all right, here we go. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.